Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're recording from a church area where we are helping out with Thanksgiving giveaways. You will see in this video and here in the background the wind and the noise of Chuck, who is here, and Maggie, who is the little dog next to him on my lap. Mouse will be appearing in the background probably. And we are joining Storm after his blow up in the family room at the Crystal Heart Lodge in Bed and Breakfast, where he has just found out that the reopening of the cold case involving the death of his grandparents and his great-grandparents is more than likely a murder situation. Thank you and welcome. Chapter 19. Kimmy sighed as she rose from the floor. Sorry, dearie, to disturb you, sweetie. She petted the cat and looked around the room. I can't guarantee I can get him back in here. He's had been told so much shit by his mother and Reed. I'll give it my best shot. But please note, we're having to deal with bits and pieces of memory coming back to him, and it seems a very big part of it involves things with our Gram. Me? Yes, he kind of thinks you may have been who he remembers as what he calls his guardian angel. She's left the room to follow Storm. That disposition is Ranella all the way, but the temperament, Reed or George would have lashed out and struck the first thing or one that they came in contact with. More like, Ethel looked at her husband, then their youngest son, as she fell silent in her own thoughts. The thoughts flowed through her mind. The walking away would be my quarterback, my Iceman, or our son, unless they'd been provoked badly. Emily gave her a nod. They've rubbed off on him at one point or another from him spending time with those two in his childhood years. Storm had his arms around Kimmy a few minutes later as they re-entered the room. Sorry, everyone. Kimmy said I'm acting like a complete ass and showing who my father was. I don't like that, nor do I want to be compared to him, especially when I know you're all trying to help and are in the same boat as me trying to figure this shit out. He bit his lip and turned to Silver and Emily. Sorry, Mom and Dad. You took me in, and I acted like that in my ancestral home. A home I don't even have a right to, really. Will you please accept my apology? All of you? He asked as he looked around the room. Glancing at those that were gathered, most of them nodded. Others shrugged. There were also thumbs ups. Forgiven. Come sit so Kimmy doesn't have to pop up like that again and disturb a kitty cat, namely Dearie. She's comfy on her beanbag. Emily patted the sofa. He shuffled over to sit. Let us explain, because this is where certain new things had been uncovered. Dakota nodded to Jim, who opened his own file and laid out 2 photos on the coffee table, to step back and open a second folder. These are copies. The originals are safe and secure, so we're good to handle these. Look at those 2 photos, pass them around, and then tell us what you see. I'll wait. Jim tapped the pictures and stepped to the side next to Dakota to cross his arms over his chest. The photos were looked at as they were handed person to person. Who the hell is in the driver's seat of the Diamoneer? And why does it look like Georgie Porgy is a mannequin against Fenella and glass-eyed at the window? To begin with, she didn't want to be near this bastard by that time. They had the fight 2 days before their death. The marriage was just in name and for show. She kept face because of what would have been the bastard's ultimate goal of destroying her reputation with his nasty-ass rumors. Happy looked at the second photo. That's not the towpath road. That's way the hell and a handbasket north above our place. The parking area 3 miles above our land, and the car's not on the trail. What the hell is that thing in the shadows? It's not even close to where the kids found the car. Chris accepted the photos from Hap. Son, he looked from the picture to his oldest child. Who took the photos? They're damn good. Ressa Dacula. Her first week working with Theo in the photography studio, about 3 weeks after she broke loose from Venice Aries, her gypsy king. She was taking photos of the canal trail where she had been camping along. She wasn't settled as of yet. She said she wanted to try out a couple of light filter lenses. You know her photos are why Papu hired her as his only assistant ever for the shop, and why she still runs it and took over all of the clientele and the school photos for the production of the yearbook. These were right after Cookie Davison and Jayla Carroll. Lou Carroll's mom? Storm looked at Jim. Yeah, she told her mom she met you at school today, and you're someone she counts, like the rest of this posse, as a true friend. Yeah, she told her mom that, and we all agree you are a friend of the posse. He looked at Kimmy. Thank you for introducing us. She smiled. Welcome. She's nice, a very nice girl. He looked back at Jim. But how do you know her? Jim chuckled and looked over her shoulder. This is my wife, Bethana. She waved. Lulu is my baby sister. Risa was taken in by Aunt Cookie and Mom. Long story short, those 2 retired go-go girls kicked ass on a gypsy king's butt when he backhanded his 15-year-old stepdaughter for her refusal to marry his 50-year-old brother. Risa was preparing for a gallery showing of her photography and came across these 2 photos 8 months ago. Jim handed Storm another photo from the folder. That's what caused us to start to backtrack and look into this again and reevaluate the evidence, and then she gave me this afternoon after she developed her roll of film. She took this a few days ago, and to answer your question, Uncle Hap, that shadow, we believe, or rather Richie, can, with the evidence he's got now, more than 99.9% prove it, is a shadow of a small tractor that's resting on a trailer that's on a hot sheet from the month before, and Richie believes it was waiting to be towed to where it was going to be needed to be used in this crime. Then it would later be dismantled and put on a derelict boat and dragged out into a lake to be sunk. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Happy looked at the photo of Main Street and the man glaring at Mystic Moments as he pulled the door open to be picked up by a truck. That's fucking Reed. Here, Chris, look. He passed the photo to their quarterback. It sure as hell is, and he looks as if he's really pissed off about something. He was preparing to get into the passenger seat of a red pickup. When the hell did he ever own a red pickup? Dad, that would be Reggie's. About 3 or 4 years ago, remember the bus shelter, Halloween? That fucker, Chris stated. Dad, now look at these. These were taken. Risa thinks earlier last month. Almost the same angle, but after the store was closed, and he's got a dark SUV. Can't tell what it is from the light. Jim passed them to his father. Graham glanced over. Son of a... What the hell was he and Georgie Porgy even doing near her? She had a restraining order on both of them. You're right, little bro. He's a little more gray around the temples and a lot more haggard. Probably from the worthless way he's run his life. But you put those photos side by side and you got your driver on the night of their deaths. Jim looked down at his report. We have DNA proof that George was in the back seat of that car and then was set or stayed behind the wheel after he was dead. There's something else. Dakota held out his hand. Richie handed him another file that he opened. The area of the towpath. It's not noticeable right away. However, when you actually do some experiments, and Uncle Max and Aunt Sonny's Jess did so for us. Thanks to Jess, the mess, he proved something we didn't know or even realize. All along the part of the towpath where the car was found, it's got a watershed grade so that when it rains or snows, the water, when it melts, runs into the canal, not into the properties inland. Jess, you want to take this field on this? Jess McMichaels nodded as he stood. In measuring and doing the figures and calculations as near as I can get close to, its calculations are that the watershed is a 2 to 3 degree sloping grade into the canal. Now, that night it was raining. It had been raining for almost a week on and off, but very heavily at times, and on that night it had been pouring all day. We're talking about a vehicle that weighs over 6,000 pounds, 3 tons plus, with the added weight of 4 full-size adult passengers, an additional 700 pounds. So let's say 7,000 pounds to round it up. Even with the only slope of a 2% grade, no way a single man can move that kind of weight. Just shook his head. Ain't no way. Richie and I figured out what it would be needed to move dead weight like that. In our estimate, an 8 horsepower per 1,000 pounds will move the vehicle. So 56 horsepower was what was needed to do the job. We took 2 horsepower off because of the downhill slope. That's 49 horsepower. Then you add the gravity to it. Hold it, Jess. Dakota shook his head. I'm not smart enough to figure that one out. But Mickey girl there, he nodded to Jess's daughter. And our twins probably are. Richie checked some old farm theft reports on a country boy's hunch. His granddaddy said that tractors and small farm stuff have that kind of horsepower and added torque. Take it away, farm boy Richie. He motioned his hand to Rich. Rich opened a file. Okay, folks. The month before, August of that year, had 2 reports filed for stolen farm equipment, a combine. Those things are friggin' huge. Hard to miss, but it was taken from the roadwork team on its trailer. One of the workers left the keys in it, and over the first weekend in August, it disappeared along with the truck that was set there to tow it away. As they had left the thing on the side of the road, and somebody with their brilliancy had left the keys in the upper sun visor of the truck. Parts of it were found 4 years later as it had been chopped and resold as used parts. The gentleman who purchased an abandoned farm out near Quakertown found a bunch of stolen goods in his barn, and he brought them at auction with the land he had purchased. A piece of metal was discovered with the combine's numbers on it. Then there was the New Hope Salisbury School District report from one of their small field tractors, and a flatbed trailer going missing before the school year started. But that's interesting. And what is interesting is that the vice principal at the time was George Carlson. What is also interesting is that parts of the tractor were dredged up on October 20th. The flatbed trailer was found 4 years later as pieces when Will Clark took possession of the Peacock Recycling Company from his father after the discovery his father was buying stolen copper. And Will is innocent on that, Storm stood. Sit down, Dakota ordered. You've made enough of a scene tonight. We know he is. Will was the one who discovered it and called it in. He didn't want his grandfather and grandmother to lose the business because his father is a friggin' ass. Will saved the company even as it cost him his own home to rescue and preserve his grandparents' house. Storm said, Sorry, but I'll stand up for Will Clark any day of the week or any time he needs me. He was good to me and tried to take care of me and my mother. I understand and respect that. He still owns and runs the business, and we'll get a hold of him and let him know you're here and safe, Dakota smiled. Thank you. I miss the man. He was really cool, Storm admitted. PayPal Sydney found out about that from Morrisville, Chris blinked. The captain of the dredge. Hold on, Uncle Chris. Noel Franks wrote it off as a joyride by kids. It cost the district a pretty penny to have it replaced for the elementary school where it came from. And at the time of the theft, the insurance had just been paid on it. We all had a vote on the bond to raise the funds. The elementary school, as I said, was the one George Carlson was vice principal at, and it was he who reported the theft. But wait a minute, Peggy spoke up. That theft actually took place at the end of the term before George was asked to take over leadership. That theft is while Principal Robert Beckler resigned. It happened the third week in May before Field Day, and we had to cancel the event because we couldn't take proper care of the fields where it was going to be held. We even had to move the Mayfair to the parking lot, and we moved our vehicles onto the field so the kids could at least have that. He didn't report the theft until August? Is that what you're telling me? No, ma'am. It wasn't reported until August. As a matter of fact, it was the last week it was reported, right before Labor Day weekend, directly before the opening of school. Richie looked at her. We went the whole summer wondering why. We had no information from anyone on the police force, and this is why, because he didn't report it for at least 3 months. Peggy folded her arms over her breast. That bastard! You're now telling me that this asshole probably caused one of the finest principals I've ever worked with to resign because he, number one, as we all know damn right well, wanted that position, as he'd been trying for it for 8 years, but didn't report the theft in May, and waited until August to place the report of stolen property, and then possibly set up the Mandula family with the help of Asshole Jr. to lose the Papadopouloses? Margaret? Hutt put his arms around his wife. Your blood pressure. Calm down. Your kids all need you, and they know you will fight for them. Calm down. Peggy inhaled deeply. You're right. My kids matter more than anything. She closed her eyes for a brief second. It's looking to me like he wanted Reed's ass to gain everything that no good bastard son of a bitch, shit and pants-chasing asshole, that he knew Ranella, as we all did, would never let him lay hands on any of her family's estate. So he plotted to get rid of them so Reed could take it all. Or so he thought, because he figured anything happened to Yaya and Papu, it would go to Ranella. Anything that went to Nellie would then go to Reed. She inhaled deeply as Hutt rubbed her shoulder. Richie ran a hand over his face and looked at Peggy. Ma'am, please let me state what Jim and I took a look at, and then I wouldn't blame you one bit if you wanted George Carlson dead all over again. I'll dig the bastard up, scalp his ass, and put an arrow through his fucking heart, and let the Ravens do their damnedest. If I hadn't chose to marry Hutchins, my next choice, because of the way he cared for children, would have been Bobby Beckler. Jess, you work with Bobby. Peggy looked at him. He's the best, and I'm glad he took my offer to come out of retirement to help me with social issues with the satellite school. I'm blessed and thank you for intervening and convincing him he was needed as part of this pathway for me. Jess nodded. And me. He's been fighting for on my side for Creed and my custody battle for him. Dan Lightfoot agreed. He's well appreciated by several families, ours included, with the help he's given all and everyone that asked for it, Reiser stated. He helped with Romeo as well, and our children also, Cricket smiled. Richie, go on, sweetie. Thanks, babe. The tractor, or mower as it was listed in the report, it was a Mosey Ferguson 2800M series, approximately 60 horsepower. One item of interest, the back bumper of the Maybach. The car seemed to have been polished or waxed, but there was a scuff at the bottom of the bumper and 2 tears, like she had been lifted then slipped, and then they decided to just push her. Noel blew it off by suggesting that it probably caught a rock, and on the downward force is what tore the bumper on the way down into the creek. I'm a freaking redneck country boy. 5 generations. I drive cricket nuts over our vegetable garden during the summer. Farmer's blood runs through my heart and my veins. It fuels me. But still, I checked my theory with my dad, then with both of my grandfathers. Both of them and all three agree with me. That mark is a small tractor front tire smudge, and the bucket was on the front and was raised above the vehicle to push. The bucket's prongs or teeth going under the bumper to lift the rear is what caused the tears in it, because the car was too much weight for the tractor to lift and probably started to tip forward and scared the piss out of them. So they dropped it and shoved it sideways with the bucket up, then pushed it into the drink. What Mr. Hack noticed in that picture is a shadow of the tractor and flatbed hidden in the trees and bushes, and the car's lights caught it through the rain when Risa snapped the photo, like Jimbo just stated. I think they were planning on dumping the car there. It's wider and deeper than where the car was found. But something stopped them, so they pulled out of there and took the car and the equipment to where it was found and dumped it. But why? Where is that spot? Storm asked. Off of the towpath behind the carriage house, right here on the land, Jim answered. Father John is right. That is way, way out of the way from that area where they were found, and it is further up along the canal where it cuts back in to other lands and the old trails. He was going to leave them here for, I think, Graham or Dad to find, and possibly, with the shit that went on between George and Dad, figure Dad would get blamed for doing something. Chris nodded. But why at that point would I have taken out Papu, Yaya, and Nellie? That doesn't make sense. He shook his head. Silver nodded. Silver and I thought... Silver and I, though, were putting together the chicken coop area. We were out there that night in the pouring down rain. We did see lights that night and started towards them, wondering who was out there on that part of the Papadopoulos' land. I think you may have scared them off, Uncle Dakota. Uncle Chris, Dakota stated. They probably saw you coming. Chapter 20. Silver stood. You all think that tractor was used to push the car into the canal, then towed down to Morrisville on the flatbed and dumped when the heat died down. So it was stashed somewhere for a day or two after the crime. Yes, sir. But it was found too soon. It was, as Uncle Chris said, from what Paul Sidney was told by his friend, and then they reported it to the police up here, the dredger at Penn Warner Lakes and Boating Club in Morrisville, and in the early fall, the week before Halloween, when the dredge nailed its pieces and that of the sunken boat, the things were put on to be sunk. It had to be hoisted from the bottom of the lake by the derrick and floating crane. They also had to use divers because it appeared the boat used rolled and capsized, then broke apart, and the remains of the disassembled tractor were scattered on the lake bottom. The trailer was found in Will's place and started the investigation. Will couldn't tell us where it came from, even checking the books. Richie, you're getting glared at, Cricket smiled. Rich turned to see the look on Storm's face. It wasn't Will, Storm. He got a look at things and called it in. He helped. But the issue was what his father was pulling behind his and his grandfather's back. He did what he could and then found out Eugene had mortgaged his grandparents' home and was up to his ass in debt with things for the business. We all helped Will to get things right, Skeeter especially. She handles his monthly bills and finances still to this day. And he's making a profit and free and clear of everything, Skeeter smiled. Jim raised a hand. And he's helped with several arrests when he's had people come to sell him stolen articles. Like Billy Black and Reggie Collier and Old Man Guideman, Graham stated. Right, Graham. When it was taken apart weeks and months after, it had actually been put on the derelict boat and towed out to the middle of the lake and purposely been sunk. As for the cause of death, Uncle Charlie and Mom, there were a few things that weren't released. One of those was that of the blood work on George. He had full-blown AIDS, probably less than a year to live at the rate he was advancing. AIDS? What? Are you sure? How the fuck? Ethel looked at Chris. The words came quick and hard as Richie raised a hand to try to stem the tide. That explains a hell of a lot of shit. Chris looked at his front offensive line of lions. She was protecting us. She knew about shit and didn't want us to have to deal with it. That's why she convinced Papu and Poppy to do the sale and set up the inn with us being in charge. Son of a... Chris shook his head. Chris, don't you lose it and storm out. We need to hear all of this, our king. Ethel clasped his hand in hers. For you, my love, and for our queen, anything, he answered and blew out a breath. Things quieted down as they all settled on Chris's statement and watched as he kissed the knuckles of his Ethel's hand. Thank you all. I know you're pissed, but this needs to be gone over. As for all the victims, they had been in that vehicle for well over 60 hours. The temperatures that week were hovering in the low 80s. Remember, this was still summer. Even with the rain, it didn't cool down. We're talking high humidity. A black car was like a sauna. There was extreme bruising on 3 of the bodies and the 3 of the Papadopouloses. That did not coincide with seatbelts or airbag injuries and injuries to their head. George Carlson showed no unaccountable signs of that. However, there was no wounds such as a gunshot or stabbing. This was a close-at-hand situation and no defensive wounds on their hands or their arms. It's freaking weird. Richie continued after a breath. Then there's the toxicology work. I did work that my mom did. They did find high levels of barbiturates in all 4 of their systems. Wait a damn second, Emily shouted as she now shot to her feet. No way. Ranella was holistic, came from Ethel, especially during her older years. She glanced at their Graham. He pushed off of the archway where he had been leaning. Aunt Ranella got me on St. John's wort for depression and salads for with a lot of variances in lettuce for my pain. No booze, no prescription drugs. She saved my life, and you all know that. They were frickin' drugged like I was some 16 years ago. He shook his head. How high were the levels after 3 days? Too high to be normal, and Mom says they would have dropped due to the environment that the bodies were in, and if they had been found much later. But on a nice day, after all that week's rain, those two, he nodded to Cody and Skeeter, they decided to start their hiking again, and sadly, they were the ones to find the car long before it was supposed to be found, because the weather had been forecasted for rain for the next several days after that. Richie looked into those dark green eyes of Graham's. Graham gave a nod. Mom, Dad, I need a damn minute. Or 10. He turned to walk out of the room. I'll go with them, Daddy. Romeo stood from the floor to follow Graham. They never even smoked weed. What the hell is with this? Peggy spat. And AIDS. She hadn't slept with Georgie Porgy in years. Why, how we can give you that date? I have it in my diary, for Christ's sake. Peggy turned. I'll be right back. She called over her shoulder as she walked into the hall. Bet put her hands on her hips. Ladies, hold it. Time to let the cat out of the bag for this younger generation who thinks we're all a bunch of squares because we've been married to the same partners since before any of them were ever born, and most of them were ever thought of. And none of you lions deny it, because us lionesses allowed it and had no issues with it. For the love of God, Ranella was our queen, the queen of the pyramid. She taught us all how to love one another, and he was the biggest fucked up bastard that ever walked on the land. His son is every bit, if not worse, than he was. If our queen needed to get her some after his bullshit and all the years she stayed celibate because she wanted to protect all of us from his ass with the possibilities of an STD, we ladies brought her the protection for one of our lions to handle the sitch for her. Yes, and mainly it was our king, our quarterback, playbook man, and my Iceman. And I had no problem with it, as none of you had a problem with it. She was our queen and deserved better than what she got stuck with. And with that asshole bastard with what he did and what he would pull on her. Ethel put her arm around Chris's waist. I agree 100%, and I'm proud to say that my center on the offensive line did her and I justice. She turned and planted a kiss on Happy. A cheer went up from the lionesses around the room. Peggy walked back in with the printer paper. He was conceived Memorial Day weekend. They were married July 8th. She found out he was cheating with Jeanette and on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving of that year, when she was doing her Christmas shopping. They pulled out of the Tanglewood Inn's parking lot right in front of her on Old York Road, and she followed them to Jeanette's construction company, where she took out her Kodak 110 and snapped the photos of them in a long, lingering kiss. She developed the film in Papu's darkroom and confronted him that weekend at the family gathering. Ranella was not quite 6 months along in the pregnancy, and the reason she confronted him then was because he'd given her the excuse he hadn't slept with her since her second trimester started because he was afraid he'd hurt the babe she carried. When it turned out he wanted to make sure she carried his heir apparent to full term, and was banging Jeanette from before they were married, and even the reason he was late to leave for their honeymoon. She passed the papers around. That's from the boxes of diaries she gave me to hold on to the day before she died. They were scanned into the Windows XP and put onto thumb drives by her and I, which are stored in the fireproof safe in the computer room wall. Storm raised an eyebrow. When you turn 18, Storm, and not before, you are to be given them, her orders, and you will obey them, Ethel stated. Several of the lionesses wrapped their men in their arms, as she did. We are proud of our men for what they did for our queen. She deserved the best of the best, and got stuck with the fool and a lame duck with a wet noodle. Ethel put her arms around her quarterback and first-string captain. Heads nodded all around as the women wrapped their men in hugs. Ethel, come here, Mouse. Come over here. Get over here on my lap. Come on into the video. There you go, Mouse. Come on, good girl. Sit. As I said, a visit from the mouse. Heads nodded all around as the women wrapped their men in hugs. Ethel and Emily stepped over to Czar and Rasputin. We're representing your ladies and our sisters. Ethel smiled as they wrapped their big-ass, badass Russian bookends in their arms. Tsar kissed Ethel on the top of her head. Rasputin choked as he bent and kissed Emily's temple. As she came back to Storm, she said, "We'll explain a little later. You're still too young to understand this." "Okay, Mom, whatever you say." He looked around the room and just sat there. "Yes, but right now, let Richie explain." Bet gestured with her hand as she looked at the diary page. "Yes, please do." Maggie took John's hand and smiled up at him. "Thank you all," she whispered. Gilly folded her arms across her chest. "That bastard. I know how he got them." "Mom?" Dakota turned to her. "Come on, Mouse. Be good." "The barbiturates. No barking at the other doggies. They have a right. You will be nice. Mouse, you're on camera. This is your video. Hey! You will behave. This is your channel. Turn around, sit. Don't bug the other doggies. I know you want to play, but no. Come on, be good girl." The barbiturates, the same way they did with Graham. Kathy and Tamara's gal pal, Virginia Perch. Reed was dating each of them at different times through those years. She got busted the following spring after their deaths. She was a pharmaceutical student and an assistant. There was a prescription pill theft. She was charged. They believed she was the ringleader, but there was an older pharmacist that something was up with as well, but she got nailed. She wasn't smart enough for that gig. Maggie shook her head. But Tammy was. Colette blew out her breath as she spoke about her daughter. "After all, he took after George, and my daughter took after the ass that fathered her, along with others in his family, and that screwed me and the family over, and at least 19 children with a lot of their mothers, thanks to Samantha." Colette, Ethel took her hand. Being Ranella's relative, through my grandfather, Leslie, and her grandmother, Pegina, being cousins, wasn't good enough for her. No, not for Tammy. She wanted to be the heir apparent of the family and the royalty to the crown. That bastard gave her ideas, and she flew with them. Then almost destroyed everything and had kept putting the children she bore in danger with all that she has done and continues to do. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Jess. I'm sorry she ever drug you into this, but I am very glad to have my granddaughter, Mickey. I was as stupid with that bastard as Ranella was in letting Georgie Porgy into her life. Auntie, the pharmacy theft. It didn't happen in New Hope. The bust. Dakota looked from his mother around to his aunts and then to his Aunt Colette. And Aunt Colette, that was not your fault. Neither is this. What happened here with this, if Tammy was involved, no. No, it didn't. The theft happened in Trenton on the west side. When she was released on bail, Gilly was interrupted by Maggie. Excuse me, Gilly, and one moment, please. Johnny, sweetheart, the Perch family. She was in her mid-20s. Father John nodded. They were part of St. Martin's of Tours, but quit because of her actions. They tried to make a deal for her to go into the witness protection program after she turned state's evidence. Her father called me. She was found in the barn, an overdose, I think it was. I don't know what of, though. She never went to trial, but she had a big-time connection with someone in New York and was connected to the motorcycle gang, the Pagans, and also to the Bastards Motorcycle Club. FDA shut the pharmacy down. Gilly looked at her son. Along with the opioids and amphetamines, barbiturates were listed as what was missing. The head pharmacist was released without incident and went to work somewhere else. Aunt Gilly, do you think Reed did this to them? Storm looked from one person to another as head after head nodded in agreement. Why? 'Cause he's another friggin' greedy ass I want to rule the world bastard, Graham answered from the doorway with one arm over Romeo's shoulder, as it was visible that the man seemed to shake. Just like his old man. Son, Chris looked at him. I'll stand, Dad. I have you all. Mandula and Storm's home, finally, where he's always belonged. Then let Ethel begin. Richie, tell us what his mom found, and we'll go from there, okay? She smiled weakly as she held out her hand to him. The man closed his eyes and reached for her hand to take. Chapter 21. Graham took her hand to kiss her knuckles. I'm okay, Mom. Promise. I'll be okay. Aunt Colette, Tammy, she's his, not yours. Yours are your boys. They take after Abuelo and Uncle Reuben. They are the best. Colette smiled. Thank you, sweetheart. Richie looked down at the file. The blood work taken and analyzed from the organs had more barbiturates in them after 3 days in the car with the heat and humidity than Mom and Uncle Charlie have ever seen. Mom compared it to 5 times the amount found in Marilyn Monroe's autopsy report. It was through the roof. They were long dead when they were put in that car, probably by hours. None of them were prescribed barbiturates. They wouldn't have been. Ethel looked at him. Azat Barr was their doctor. I don't understand how. Richie held up a hand. Aunt Ethel, remember, we're talking Reed here. There were no prescriptions on file here in town or Lambertville, and Doc Azart never wrote any for them. We checked 20-mile radius. Uncle Charlie and Mom agreed. The cause of death was not from the results of the car crash, and the injuries that were sustained after death, someone took out their anger on the deceased remains of Ranella, Poppy, and Theo. Then placed them into the car. George's body was positioned behind the wheel to make it look like he was driving. Chris leaned forward. You're telling me George knew about the AIDS, and this was a murder-suicide planned out between him and Reed if his body wasn't... Uncle Chris, the only injuries after his death took place because of Noel Franks, and the impact of the body when it went south in the canal where it ended up in the tangles and at the pillar of the bridge that it hit. And we know he had lost his license because of the DUI over the summer because he was carpooling to school with Aunt Peggy and bitched about not being able to drive his own car anymore, which is still in the auto barn. That's the escort wagon. And the other 5 and the van had been forced to be sold 2.5 years earlier, and because of that DUI, he'd almost lost a position as principal. So why was he found behind the wheel? How did he get to said meeting, wherever the hell it was? And we found a statement we didn't have thanks to Franks. What statement, Richie? Father John asked his son-in-law. A statement from Pinky Bellows. It dates the week after their death. She states that she was outside of the front garden of the apartment building, the Bellows her own, working in her flower bed, and a dark green Jeep pulled up. 2 men were in it. George got in the back seat and they drove away. Someone obviously didn't know he was prohibited from driving, and yet they picked him up. Why? When was this set up? Because it looks to me like it was a setup. 1 second, Richie. Chris put up a finger. That night, Effie, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Ranella have me set the seat mode in the car because it kept changing to the second person, and she had trouble reaching the pedals because the second person was Papu Theo, and he was over 6.5 foot, and her height was only 5'4". Yes, and you and Silver disabled it so it wouldn't do that as she was driving. And if they purchased it, it was going to be our Graham that drove it, so it would be needed to be set for his height of 6 foot. But Silver not only disabled it, I took the effing fuse out because the son of a bitch damn near electrocuted me when the mother arced to my wedding band from the meter lead, and we realized the shitting thing had been damaged when it was first sideswiped and was then arcing and hitting ground from the frame. So to prevent the Queen or Yaya or Papu or that one, he pointed to the arthritic hand at Graham from getting a tingle, because I know my quarterback son, my own godson, would have snapped to protect the ladies. That seat would have met its match with a screwdriver and wire cutters, and it would have been all over but the shouting. You're damn right, Uncle Silver, or I would have turned it over to the Iz man, and when the Wizard of Iz got done with it, there wouldn't have been nothing left of it. The man does not have the patience, and he has never had filters. Graham chuckled. Turn it over to the Wizard of Iz, and there wouldn't have been nothing left of the car. Jess laughed. Just the mess is right on that, Dan agreed. For a brief time, this brought some laughter to the seriousness of the meeting. Mom, who's Izzy? Storm leaned in as she sat back down. Dad's and my oldest son. He's a lot bigger than Dad. Storm looked at Silver as he stood there. In his thoughts, he looked from Silver off to the side and back. Then that is the giant I remember at the ball game, 'cause the two really crazy guys are Jess and Dan. I now recognize them. Storm thought as he eyed up Silver. So, George was 6'2", or thereabouts, she at 5'4". He would have been squashed in the seat. Chris looked at Richie. A good assumption, Uncle Chris, and you're right. He was stuffed in that seat. That's why there's questions as to why Noel went for the driver's door when the passenger's door would not have let the water infiltrate the car. That raises questions on his involvement in this whole damn thing. Thank you, Maggie. Which throws some light onto some other things along the way. Chris stroked his gold and silver goatee. Rich gave a nod. That B-12 by itself weighs in at close to 1,000 pounds. It nosedived instead of flipping upside down like the car Jessica Savage died in the 1980s. If it had flipped in the canal with the heavy rains we had that preceded in week and sunk in the mud upside down, its weight of over 3 tons. It was a little over 5 feet high in height at the roofline. That car wouldn't have been found until we had a drought and the water level would have dropped to below 5 feet. So I think in Uncle Chris and Uncle Silver seeing the lights and approaching, they had a quick plan change, Czar stated, and that drew their chance in pin shit on Chris, which would have been George's plan. I think you're right, Uncle Czar. With the disbursement of the vehicle in the area's water, that may never have happened because that part of the canal narrows so the water level rises with the smaller width and the walls, and that's why it is a deeper drop-off there. So, in reopening this, you're calling it homicide. Pat looked at his son. Dakota inhaled and gave a nod. Yes, and to answer your question, Storm, of why, you're sitting in it. If Mandula hadn't taken it off of him in a poker tournament when you were just 5 years of age, we found out he'd been checking the real estate agents in the area the year prior to their deaths. Chapter 22, money. Using it as collateral for something. And George had initiated drawings several years before of having the inn redesigned. Graham looked at them. I found them in the van the day it was being cleared out for rain to take over. Papu. Him losing it, and that's the night he called the meeting with all of us and made the offer on the stock sale to us, and we created the Mandula Foundation to protect the inn. Chris nodded, as did the rest of the men and their wives, and the children of the next generation that were there. Ethel put her hands to her mouth. "Oh, my God!" She removed her hand and pointed to Dakota. "The week of Thanksgiving, the prior week, Reed was here when they had the homeowner's business insurance evaluated and update. Graham wouldn't let him in. There was a standoff between the two of them, and Ranella stood with our son and made the threat that if George didn't back off, he'd be getting a very nasty surprise for Thanksgiving, and she was not kidding. Reed left, Mom, but George insisted he had to talk to her and followed them around throughout the assessment, and after the paperwork was set up, he didn't stick around. He never talked to her. He just up and left." Graham crossed his arms over his chest. He took the insurance assessment and ran to Reed with the information and values. "I bet my weight in beans on that." "That's right. We do it once a year prior to tax season for Skeeter. It was done today when Storm was in school, and it was assessed at $75 million plus another $10 million for the adjoining lands and for the 5 acres beyond the footbridge and the wooded areas of the hiking paths that cross onto the land that belonged to the Fertile Crescent, Sunjay Garden Center, Nursery, and Tree Farm, where they meet and access the trails to Ruzi Cougart's miniature animal farm and therapy trail ranch. 10 years ago, oh, good Lord, 10 years ago, I'd have to pull the paperwork, but, Ethel, that would have been at least 50 mil, easily. Chris shook his head. His gambling debts. He asked Pat Pooh at that time about a loan and was turned down. Then he went to Yaya Poppy. He was told, 'cause I was present, and I quote, "You haven't and can't or won't even take care of your own child. You damn deadbeat dad. You think I'm stupid enough to loan you money. I'd just as soon burn it or die before that." Unquote. Crap. And you know, they all nodded their heads. Aunt Ranella threw his ass out when he asked her, Graham growled. And he really got pissed when he found out he couldn't touch the insurance policies, Czar stated. "Yeah," Rasputin agreed. "Our ladies witnessed it when they were changed with the beneficiary to Storm and Emily as trustee of the funds. Chris and Silver had the trust set up for the land. Who was executive to their wills? Can anyone remember? 'Cause along with the other papers," a shaking voice interrupted. Executive of the will was Uncle Jackson. But he was a lawyer, and that way there was nothing Reed could do about it. I just wish we could have stopped his ass before that September. Storm would have still had his grands, and Reverend Father Uncle John wouldn't have risked his soul in that poker game. And Aunt Liliana, I got a bad feeling. She wouldn't be a widow now because Uncle Jackson, I don't think, would have died in front of that train with the other assistant district attorney in Center City. Graham shook his head and folded his arms around himself. Yaya Poppy would not have liked this situation at all. John patted his shoulder and pointed upward. "Graham, he was on our side. He provided a royal flush of all things in that night. It was a royal flush in spades, the death cards. That took out that cheater's aces over kings full house. And you, little brother, were given the blessing 2 nights later of throwing his ass out of O'Shaughnessy's Irish pub to a standing ovation when he gave a pat on the rear to a teenage hide-and-seek. Jim gave him a nod and produced a weak smile. You all know I kind of saved that bastard's life that night. If I didn't throw him out, her being 14 and losing both her parents in Afghanistan within 2 weeks of each other, the O'Shaughnessy's males would have killed him. Otis would have had a smorgasbord of doggy bones beyond the veil. Storm looked from one adult to the rest. Emily patted his knee. You graduate from high school, young man, with what they and what Mandula set up, and Graham and I put into money market and CDs that roll over every year. You can go to Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, or whatever college or university for medical, law, or whatever you choose to do, even becoming a CPA. Debt-free, and this place is held for you until you turn 35 in trust. We of Mandela set it up that way with a few bonuses. We will be your partners, and at that time, if you want us to vacate, we will. Never, Mom. Storm looked around as he shook his head. None of you would ever leave this inn. You're my family, the only family I have. I don't ever want any of you to go anywhere. But can I ask something? What does Mandula mean? I've never heard it in all of my life, but I heard it only from Grandma and you all. I heard Reed curse it, and Kathy say her mother could have been part of it if she had wanted to be. But none of you carry it as a last name. What's it actually mean? Emily put her arms around him to kiss his cheek. We'll never let you go. You're stuck with all of us for as long as you want, sweetheart, and that includes the posse you are part of and the merry little folks who are the younger ones than you. It's a made-up word from our childhood. Silver smiled. It was a word we used when we told each other we loved one another. Back in the 70s and 80s, even in the 90s, it wasn't thought of as cool to tell a guy when you were a guy that you loved them. So whether it was the opposite sex, or a brother to brother, or a sister to sister, or a brother to sister, or vice versa, Ranella made up the word, and we used it ever since. Mandula, son. He put an arthritic hand out. One after another placed their hands on his to create a pile. Man, woman, teenagers, and children. Storm's left hand rested on top of Graham's. Scout's on his. On top of hers were Laurel's and Heather's, with their Uncle Tip's and Aunt Becky's, who was Emily's niece through her oldest sister and ex-brother-in-law's first marriage. And finally, the tiny hand of Mickey's on top of her father's. Graham gave a smile. Welcome home, Storm. Mandula. Storm quietly spoke and smiled. Emily put her arm around his shoulder once more and gave him a hug. Chapter 23. The next 2 days were a blur of activity for Storm between school, ABC-S, Mystic Moments, and the Crystal Heart Lodge Inn Bed and Breakfast. Tuesday morning, they had one hell of a terrifying visual experience. The teens were getting ready to head for Bessie and the ride down to the school shelter. Parked next to the old VW bus was the rental car that belonged to the Willows as the girls were saying their goodbyes. Dr. Danny was standing with her arms around Cricket, then Christina, and they were surrounded by their other sorority sisters of their college days, and Danny's younger sister Becca, as these ladies were also her friends. Becca and her partner Bam Bam had spent their honeymoon visiting her own sorority sisters in Flea and Albania with a special friend in Graham, and the friendship that involved a lady named Destiny and another lady from Iowa by the name of Lily Dietz, who was a spa owner out there. There were promises made all those years prior that they would be kept forever as friends and to keep in touch and visit every fall. Letters, cards, and phone calls would be made, but nothing so crass as emails. Especially now that Mickey was pen pals with little Millie Washington, Danny Jonathan's and Jonathan's older brother, Julius's goddaughter. Dr. Jonathan was loading their luggage when all hell broke loose. Carrie Lynn had looked up from playing with the 3 dogs that had been left out, and Graham would take back in after their bathroom break and final goodbyes. "Daddy, Big Kitty is flying!" "What?" Jonathan stood upright so fast he slammed his head, as he stood at over 6 foot in height, into the back hatch of the SUV. "Motherfucker!" He put his hand to his head where he'd slammed it into the latch and looked up and bolted around the back of the vehicle as the blood trickled down the back of his shaggy haircut. Danny took off from the side of the vehicle with her sorority sisters, within the allowance she could move, as she was slower than normal, but she was moving as fast as her almost 9-month pregnant body would allow her. Stanley, the large Maine Coon cat, had leapt after a bird and come flying out of an unknown broken window for the sycamore tree's limb on the 4th story at the playroom. "One of you get Rain! Oh my gods!" Emily shrieked. She watched in horror as the cat performed a mid-air flip 3 stories in the air for him to attempt an unsuccessful twist to right his huge body. He was going to land on his head and back. Ilya bolted as he dropped his backpack. Stanley was coming down at an awkward angle with his head bowed to his chin and on a tilt to his right side as his paws reached out and only caught air, and his tail was bushed out to pure terror. "No!" Emily screamed. Somehow Storm had kept his feet straight enough to get close enough to the air-sailing cat and dove. Oomph! Storm landed a foot into a large holly bush off of the screened-in back kitchen porch as he laid out his arms to catch them roll with Stanley in them and held the large multiply colored cat to his chest, tucking him close to his great-grandfather's army jacket. "Oh my God, Stormy!" Emily was by his side. He opened his eyes to squeeze them shut in prayer that he had made the catch. Breath came ragged from both him and the cat. "Let's get him in the house." Chris crouched next to him with Graham. Rain, gentle as possible, removed the panting cat from the teen's heaving chest. "I got Stanley. You just saved one of his 9 lives. Dad?" Storm looked up at Graham. "I can't move." "What?" Silver stepped in. "I'm stuck to the holly bush and don't want to destroy Pat Pooh's jacket." "Graham, get me loose, please." Chris, Graham, and Silver looked at each other, then down at him. "He's worried about that old jacket, not himself. Sounds familiar." Silver shook his head and looked at Graham. The younger man shrugged. It was Papoose. They started to get the spiked leaves released from the cloth to slowly free him. Danny and Jonathan had run back to the girls to scoop them both up, then hightailed it into the inn to check on the cat with Rain. "Are you hurt?" Graham asked. "No," Just my ass is wet. I think I busted the sprinkler hose. I'm going to look like I pissed myself in school. Emily, get the rest of the posse to the shelter. I'll take Storm to school after we're sure he's okay and get him dry clothes. I'm here, Uncle Stilber. Let me help. Ilya reached out for Storm to take his hands. Ilya gave a pull as Silver helped him to his feet. Stanley, is he alive? Is he okay? There's 3 vets here. He's in good hands, Silver assured. Storm bent forward with his hands on his knees to try to inhale. I got you, brother. Ilya rested a hand on his back. Let's get you in and dry. The scare was handled within the hour. Graham had a window repair tech out. Rain was taking care of Stanley, and the cat was sedated so he would rest after the horrifying flight. The Willows were on their way to the airport after Danny had put stitches into Jonathan's head. Still on time, with the very large teddy bear with Carrie Lynn as a thank you gift for her with her giving of a panic alert. Storm had a few minor aches and was dry and changed and a hero to all the posse when he arrived at school. He opened his arms to Ilya, who wrapped him in a Russian-Ukrainian bear hug and lifted him off of his feet. Thank you, brother, for saving Stanley. You okay? I'm a little bruised, and I'm feeling like a pincushion from the holly bush and starting to stiffen from the cold of the broken sprinkler hose. But I'm good. Thank you for running and getting rain as Doc's Danny and Jonathan were caught off guard. Who would think as a house cat he would try to fly? Are we sure he's not a crazy Russian like some of us? Ilyana had her arms around Ivana's shoulder. Or a mixed-up Ukrainian that has gone round the bend? She smiled at Triton. He winked at her. I'm keeping my opinion to myself on that one. Irina nodded. Da, a very smart move on your part, Triton. Thank you, Stormy, for his life. He is a wonderful pussycat. Glad I could do it, but there was something weird. I don't remember moving, and it was like I was being lifted by a force and moved into position. The teens looked at each other. What? Graham and Uncle Chris can do stuff like that. And they were both there, Kimmy told them. The group was silent as Storm raised an eyebrow. And we are finishing our story for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the interruption of our crazy hounds in this of Chuck and Maggie Lowe and, of course, the Crazy Mouse. We will continue next week with the story when Storm may start to find out some information about part of the past and the family of Mandula that he doesn't know about. Please hit like and subscribe. And if you subscribe, ring the bell so you are notified when the next segment takes place. Thank you. Have a blessed day.